George Springer of the Houston Astros celebrates with Carlos Correa at the 2017 World Series Ezra Shaw, Getty Images. Every time the Knicks step onto the court these days, it's clear their strategy isn't based on trying to win games this season. Their strategy is completely about the future. They won't use the word, but everyone knows what they are doing. It's called tanking. The issue of tanking has become one of the most compelling subjects in sports. While it may have originated decades ago, it feels as if it's more prevalent now than ever. It's a polarizing philosophy that engulfs organizations, media coverage and fan bases. That prompted the Post to explore this fascinating subject. In this ongoing series, we'll examine how and why tanking became so prominent, reveal how fans view the strategy and propose our solutions to fix it. Derek Jeter, tanking. What is tanking? Bryant Gumbel, tanking is not trying your hardest to win ball games every day. Jeter, we're trying to win ball games every day. HBO's Real Sports. April 2018. Mr. November hardly stands alone in his obfuscation of the multi-sport trend that has grabbed hold of baseball for nearly a decade now. After all, upon becoming the Marlins CEO after the 2017 season, the beloved former Yankee simply followed a trend, rather than setting one, when he oversaw the trades of his new team's best players D. Gordon, Marcell Ozuna, Giancarlo Stanton and Christian Yelich. The hard work paid off with a 63-98 record in 2018, a 13.5-game drop from the previous season, giving Miami the 4th overall pick in this year's amateur draft. Just another baseball tale of successful lack of success. Trying to win every day. Given the subjectivity of trying, perhaps the best take calls for turning the situation on its ugly head. Even if you respect the strategy, it's trying to see how many teams have punted on entire seasons, or clusters of seasons. What began as a loophole capitalization has turned into a movement that has caught up baseball with the NBA in at least one department. "I worry about the quality of the product," said Jim Duquette, the former Mets general manager and Orioles vice president of baseball operations who now works as an MLB network radio analyst. "There are 8 teams in just the American League that are looking to rebuild or don't feel like their window is open right now. That's a lot of teams. Maybe you view the Twins as a dark horse contender, that still leaves 7, the Orioles, White Sox, Tigers, Royals, Mariners, Rangers and Blue Jays, tankerish entities in the junior circuit. Throw in 4 more, Jeter's Marlins, the Diamondbacks, Padres and Giants, from the National League. I've got demotions 11, all but 3, the Diamondbacks, Mariners and Padres, the former 2 of which seriously contended, already experienced attendance drops last year, as the industry lost more than 3 million spectators overall. With superstar free agents Bryce Harper and Manny Machado still unsigned just days before pitchers and catchers report, the practice of tanking serves as a particularly electric lightning rod in the heightening tensions between players and owners, so much so that, when the owners proposed changes in pace of play, the players countered by proposing changes in baseball's economic structure that would put a stop to this prominent trend. The ill will that tanking has wrought makes its baseball origin story all the more ironic. The Big Bang occurred in November 2011, when the players and owners avoided a work stoppage for the 3rd straight time when a work agreement that was heralded for its spirit of cooperation between the two sides. Among the most notable changes was an official cap on amateur draft spending. Driven by this principle, not only would the teams with the worst record pick the highest in each round, but they also would be allocated the most money, a draft spending pool, to spend without incurring penalties. "The pool money has become very important," Duquette said. Said Dan Duquette, former Red Sox GM and Orioles vice president, and Jim's cousin. The system encourages it. About a month before that collective bargaining agreement reached the finish line, the Cubs introduced Theo Epstein, previously of the Red Sox, as their new president of baseball operations. And a couple of weeks after Bud Selig and Michael Weiner smiled at a Manhattan news conference and discussed their latest deal, the Astros hired Jeff Luhnow as their GM. Luhnow and Epstein, and their franchises, became the faces of baseball tanking. The Astros went to combined 181-305 in Lunau's first 3 seasons, collecting the highest draft pools in 2013 and 2014. They also owned the top overall pick in 2012, as Lunau inherited the industry's worst club, and trading any veterans with value for youngsters during that span. They acquired future Rookie of the Year, Carlos Correa, third baseman Alex Bregman and pitcher Lance McCullers Jr. through the draft and traded for outfielder Marvin Gonzalez and pitcher Brad Peacock. Their payroll plummeted from nearly $77 million in 2011 to almost $61 million in 2012 to just over $26 million in 2013, as per Cox baseball contracts. The Cubs followed a near-identical path, and if they couldn't quite match the Astros' loss-for-loss, they posted a 200-286 mark in 2012-14. The franchise made the most of its misfortune. Chicago selected future most valuable player Chris Bryant with the 2nd overall pick of the 2013 draft and then slugger Kyle Schwarber with the 4th overall spot in 2014. The Cubs also pulled off huge trades, primarily of veterans, that landed future Cy Young winner Jake Arrieta from the Orioles, pitcher Kyle Hendricks from the Rangers, first baseman Anthony Rizzo from the Padres, and shortstop Addison Russell from the A's. Their payroll decreased gradually from $134 million in 2011 to slightly more than $92 million in 2014. In 2016, the Cubs won their first World Series since 1908. The next year, the Astros captured their first championship in their 56-year history. Now both teams are high-payroll, perennial contenders. "I think that baseball is a copycat league," said Steve Phillips, who preceded Jim Duquette as Mets GM and now broadcasts for MLB Network Radio and TSN, "and if something works for one team, we all want to try it." What worked was tearing it down for the Astros, Cubs and Royals, who won it all in 2015, albeit with a slightly more conventional rebuild. Developments since 2011, on top of the Cubs and Astros' success, have only heightened tanking's benefits. Enhanced analytics questioned the wisdom of signing players over 30 to long-term deals. Increased media scrutiny of every transaction created more self-scrutiny among teams. 2016 CBA, which intensified the penalties for going well above the luxury tax threshold, further disincentivized teams from spending too much on payroll. If you didn't think you were ready to launch a run of contention, why not save money, avoid the headaches and plan ahead while losing? The change in culture, the heavy emphasis on process, has turned many executives into stars. When the White Sox followed the lead of their Windy City rivals and dealt away their top veterans, a T-shirt reading, "Hindsight is 2020, an acknowledgement of GM Rick Hahn and the team's desired year of contention," went for sale. However, the tank typically tests the patience of most fans, and it remains a subject that most executives, just like Jeter, would just as soon avoid. Epstein didn't return an email, and Hahn declined comment. Lunau wrote in an email, "Every team has different, and everyone ultimately wants to win as soon as possible." When "as soon as possible" means not quite yet for over one-third of the league, it leads to tension and calls for reform. "There's got to be some incentives to get into the playoffs and also some incentives to not suck," Jim Duquette said. He suggested adding an extra playoff spot for each league and penalizing teams that lose more than 95 games. Adam Fisher, the former Mets executive who now works for SNY, suggested a bonus draft pick between the first and second round, for any team that finishes with a winning record and misses the playoffs, thereby rewarding effort that falls short. In a similar spirit, just last week, the Players Association made proposals to penalize teams that lost 90-plus games in consecutive years, lowering their draft slot as well as their international pool money. The union also would like to restructure the revenue-sharing calculus to reward teams that perform well on the field. "These teams are all going to come back and will be trying to spend again," Phillips vowed. "They'll get to a point where, once they get back to being competitive, they'll make the good decisions where they don't have to tear it down again. That's the ideal, right? A time with no more tankers." Can baseball reach such a utopia? Given the crisis that looms over the sport, can it afford to wait and find out?